Mayor Yarn?
Please.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us late in the afternoon, Sergeant Lank. I'm going to direct your attention to your relationship with the Albert family and some of the members of the Albert family. Do you know who Tim Albert is?
Yes.
Do you know who Chris Albert is?
Yes.
Do you know who Brian Albert?
Interrupt. I just need your name for the.
I'm so sorry. Can you please state your name and spell your name for the record, please?
Michael Lank, L-A-N-K.
Michael, common spelling?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll start over.
Sure.
Do you know who Tim Albert is?
I do.
And do you know who Chris Albert is?
I do.
And do you know who Brian Albert is?
I do.
How do you know Tim Albert?
I know Tim Albert to be one of the younger brothers of the Albert family
How long have you known Tim?
since childhood.
What about Chris Albert?
Yes, I know Chris
How long have you known Chris?
since childhood.
And how would you describe your relationship with Chris Albert?
Chris and I were pretty good friends growing up, right into our 20s. Still friendly when I see him.
Still socialize with him?
No.
When did you last socialize with Chris Albert?
I couldn't tell you the last time I personally socialized with him. I've seen him at events, but Chris and I don't make arrangements to go out together.
What about Brian Albert?
No.
How would you describe your relationship with him?
Civil,
Friendly?
exchange pleasantries when I see him. Hello.
But you're closer to Chris.
Yes.
Have you ever described yourself as being a longtime, quote unquote, drinking buddy with Chris?
No.
Would you describe yourself previously, in years past, as being a drinking buddy with Chris?
No.
Have you ever gone out for drinks with Chris?
Not in years.
Ever?
Yes.
So you've socialized with him in circumstances in which y'all are drinking and imbibing.
It's been many years, but yes.
Your relationship with Chris certainly goes all the way back to 2002.
Again, we were friendlier back then, yes.
Right. Back in 2002 in August, while you were off duty, were you out either drinking with Chris or in some way at a restaurant or a bar with Chris?
No.
Were you close in proximity to Chris when he was out drinking and at a bar?
No.
Was he at a restaurant?
I don't know where he was.
Were you at a bar?
I was.
At some point, did you realize that Chris was getting into some sort of a physical altercation with somebody else in a parking lot?
Yes.
Did you jump into a fist fight in order to protect Chris Albert?
Chris actually approached my vehicle and started to describe an altercation that had been in previously in the night.
When you say your vehicle, your personal vehicle?
Yes.
Okay, so you were off duty, is that right?
Yes.
You've been drinking?
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that, but just
Yes.
so happens that you've been drinking that afternoon.
Yes.
Tim Albert was with Chris, correct?
Not when I saw him, no.
Okay. Ultimately, when you realized that Chris Albert was in some sort of fracas, some sort of fight or altercation, you activated yourself as a police officer at the time.
He wasn't in a fracas when he approached my vehicle. He approached my vehicle and stated that he had been in an altercation earlier in the night with one of the Lapalato brothers, and that during that altercation, threats were made against him and his family, and he was seeking advice because he knew as a police officer as to how he should go forward. And as I was telling him what to do, that's when a group of men started to walk down Washington Street towards Chris, and he said, "Oh no, here they come."
So that would be Mark Lapalato, correct?
Yes.
And his brother Alfred.
Yes. Alfredo.
Alfredo, sorry. You got out of your car and approached the other men.
Yes.
You also called for a Canton police backup.
I brought my attention to the restaurant owner and a bartender who had walked out into the street, and I yelled for them to call the Canton police.
Canton police did in fact arrive, correct?
They did.
Isn't it true that after you got involved and Canton police arrived, you then instructed some of your colleague police officers to handcuff Alfredo?
I can't recall.
Isn't it true that after Alfredo was handcuffed and, for all intents and purposes, physically incapacitated, you then approached Mark Lapalato.
No.
You got into a fight with Mark Lapalato, though.
Yes.
You punched him in the face.
At one point after he had struck me, yes.
So your story is he struck you first, and then you punched him.
Yes.
His story, of course, is you punched him first.
I don't know what his story is.
Well, you were sued in federal court, and he told you his story in that lawsuit, correct?
So I actually have a question. The criminal case was adjudicated. The civil case, I did sign a non-disclosure, so I'm not sure if I can speak on that.
I will never ask you what the nature of any settlement in that case was. Just the fact that you were sued in a public document, which a federal lawsuit is a public document. You were sued in federal court over this incident that I'm talking about, correct?
Yes,
And ultimately it was settled. I'll never ask you what the terms of the settlement are. 'Cause that's
it was settled, yes.
Okay. Ultimately, you said that the criminal case was adjudicated. We'll get to that in just a second. Did you testify at that criminal case?
I did.
All right. I want to sort of tailor this a little bit because we're on a little bit of a time crunch, and I want to be sensitive to the court's time and your time. The allegation that Mark Lapalato made against you is that you punched him, took him to the ground, continued to beat him, and bit him to the point of drawing blood, correct?
I believe that was his allegation, yes.
Then indicated that once the police officers that were there pulled you off of him, you then turned and walked over to Alfredo while he was still incapacitated, meaning physically handcuffed, and spat in his face.
I believe that was his allegation, yes.
Ultimately, both men, after this altercation, were allowed to leave the location, correct?
I believe one fled and the other one was allowed to leave, yes.
Okay. You're telling me now that Mark Lapalato punched you first, a police officer, correct?
Yes.
And are you aware of any circumstance in which an individual would be able to punch a police officer on duty or off duty in the presence of other police officers and just be released? That wouldn't happen, would it?
I don't believe the other police officers were on scene when the fight initiated.
Did you tell them that you got punched?
I don't recall.
They certainly let Mark go, correct?
Mark fled.
Okay. And then
Alfredo was released.
so the next day, Mark and Alfredo showed up at Canton PD to file a complaint against you and some of the other police officers that were involved, correct?
That's what I was told. I wasn't there.
You didn't file a report for assault, or battery, or anything like that, correct?
I spoke with my sergeant that night and he said that I could do the report when I came back in on my next day of work.
My question is, on that night, did you file a report?
No,
The next day, did you file a report?
I don't recall if it was 1 or 2 days later.
It's actually 3 days later, wasn't it?
I'm not sure.
Does it sound like that's in the time frame? It probably was about 3 days later.
I honestly couldn't tell you. It's 22 years ago. I'm not really sure.
But between the time this fight happened and you filed a report, Mark Lapalato and his brother Alfredo came into Canton PD and asked to swear out a complaint against you and fellow officers, correct?
I believe so.
And they were told to go away on that day.
I couldn't speak to that.
By the time they came back to file the complaint, then police reports had been written, right?
I don't know.
Once those police reports were written, after they indicated that they wanted to file a complaint, ultimately charges were brought against them, correct?
Again, ultimately charges were brought. I don't know the exact timeline.
After charges had been brought, and both brothers ended up having to go to court and defend themselves, you ran into both brothers at a mobile gas station.
Yes.
You confronted both brothers, correct?
No.
You approached both brothers.
No.
Isn't it true that you walked up and said, "How you doing?" to the two guys? And one of them responded, "Not so good. You attacked me and now I've got to go to court."
No,
That conversation?
I believe they initiated the conversation with me.
Did you say, "How are you doing?"
Something to that nature.
And did they respond something to the effect of, "I'm not doing so good because you attacked me and now I've got to defend myself in court"?
I don't recall exactly what they said in response.
And then, based on that interaction, you arrested them for witness intimidation, correct?
Well, there was further interaction. It wasn't just the response to how are you doing? They made threats and they were ultimately arrested, yes.
So your claim now is that they made threats against you, a sitting police officer at the time, a working police officer.
Yes,
Okay. And you reported that threat to the DA's office,
yes,
and charges were brought against them. I'm sorry. A report was brought against them for that witness intimidation, correct?
correct.
Ultimately, with regard to the assault charges for which they were arrested and tried, they were found not guilty in a public adjudication, criminal case, correct?
Correct.
And the DA's office threw out the witness intimidation charges because they were meritless. Isn't that right?
The charges were thrown out.
And all of this history that we've just talked about came on the heels of you assisting Chris and Tim Albert in a fight they said they had been in earlier in the evening. Is that right?
No,
You just told us that the reason you got involved in this melee, this fight to begin with, was because Chris Albert approached you and said, I was in a fight with some guys earlier tonight, and here they come.
yes, and you just said that he was with Tim Albert. I never saw Tim Albert that night.
My mistake. Let's just leave it at Chris.
He was with his fiance.
Okay. So all of this situation emanated from you coming to the aid of Chris Albert, your friend, longtime childhood friend, correct?
It had nothing to do with it being Chris Albert.
Isn't it true that it had everything to do with it being Chris Albert?
No,
So just a regular random guy off the street, you would have conducted yourself the exact same way.
absolutely.
Isn't it true that what you actually did, Sergeant Lank, in that particular circumstance, was you came to the aid of a friend and you used your position as a police officer to further that assistance and that protection?
No,
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Lally?
thank you.
Whatever happened between Christopher Albert and these brothers in that particular evening, you weren't present for that?
No,
And your testimony that Tim Albert wasn't present at any point in time when you were there either, correct?
no.
Now, with regard to Tim Albert, what, if any, other involvement have you had with him as far as through your official duties as a police officer?
I was involved in an investigation where we had to take out charges against Tim Albert.
So you've been involved in an investigation where charges were actually taken out against a member of the Albert family, correct?
Correct.
And do you recall roundabout when that was?
I believe it was 2012.
Do you recall who, if anyone, from your department was working with you on that investigation?
It would have been Officer Good at the time.
And that's now Sergeant Sean Good, is that correct?
That's correct.
Same Sean Good involved in this case, correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to the federal suit that was brought, that was settled, correct?
That's correct.
There was no disposition on it, no finding of liability or anything of the like.
Correct.
Now, with respect to Brian, how would you describe your relationship with him?
Again, civil.
The two of you friends?
Could you repeat that, please?
Are the two of you friends?
No.
Do you socialize with Brian Albert? Have you at any point in time?
I've been at events where Brian is at, and we will say hello, but that's pretty much the extent of it.
Have you ever socialized with Brian Albert, just the two of you?
No,
You ever been to his house or inside his house?
no,
Now, with regard to, other than that day of January 29th, 2022, correct?
correct.
You and Brian Albert, do you get along?
Say that again?
I said, he and Brian Albert, do they get along?
We have had some disagreements, I'd say, in the past, but we're civil. We get along. enough to say hello.
Anything to do with your response, your interviews, or anything to do with January 29th, 2022, have anything to do with the Albert family or Brian Albert or Christopher Albert or anything to do with the Alberts whatsoever?
No,
That didn't change what you were doing, how you were doing it, or how you conducted yourself in this investigation. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Nothing further.
Okay,
I have one slight area to cover with the court's permission.
okay.
Concerning Tim Albert and this issue, or the investigation where charges were brought against Tim Albert, that was a circumstance in which Tim Albert, in broad daylight, slammed into a parked car belonging to a woman and then fled the scene, correct?
No,
Didn't you follow a trail of transmission fluid or something to find where he had gone?
I did.
And he fled directly to 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
He didn't live there. He went to his brother's house. Brian,
No, that's not correct.
he lived there at the time?
Yes,
Okay, so you follow the trail of whatever it is, fluid trail, all the way to where Tim Albert had fled to, and you basically had no choice. He had just slammed into the back of a car and then fled the scene. Isn't that right?
I concluded my investigation by locating the vehicle that had heavy damage.
Right, the vehicle that he hit.
His vehicle.
His vehicle had heavy damage, but so did the vehicle that he hit, correct?
So what you had said a minute ago that he hit a parked car. That's incorrect.
Oh, he hit a moving car.
It was a vehicle that was, I believe it was stopped at a light. It wasn't a parked car. It was a vehicle that was stopped.
Okay. Irrespective of whether the engine was running or parked or not, he hit a car
Yes,
with a woman in it, fled the scene, then you find him trying to hide out at 34 Fairview, correct?
he had parked the car at 34 Fairview.
And you didn't have much choice. I mean, there you have it. The evidence is right in front of you. You can't really cover that one up, right?
I would say I did my
Objection,
job.
Your Honor. Move to strike.
So this is Voir, dear. Could you answer the question, please?
I would say I did my job.
Okay. Did you engage in any kind of a DUI investigation?
We spoke with him.
Did you give him FSTs?
I don't recall if I did. I know I didn't. I don't recall if Officer Good did.
Did you give him a breathalyzer?
I did not.
Did you ask him for a blood test?
I did not.
So no DUI investigation was really undertaken, correct?
Again, I can't recall what Officer Good did, but I was there.
But you didn't do it. You didn't do what I just suggested, a full-blown DUI investigation, even though he hit another car and then fled the scene.
We spoke with him and he gave an explanation.
And that explanation coming from Tim Albert was, I'm really sorry, I panicked, right?
It was something to that nature.
And he turned around, well, I'll just cut to the chase. Y'all ended up charging him with a misdemeanor, correct?
I believe so.
And he was given diversion
I don't know.
and his record was wiped clean.
I don't know.
That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Sergeant. You can step down, sir.
Thank you.
I'll hear you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be very brief. I spoke about the Aguiar case a couple of days ago, and I think it's still attendant to our conversation today or discussion today. That case stands for the proposition that it doesn't matter if the evidence reveals something other than something that's otherwise inadmissible, as long as the material elaborates on or establishes that there could be some sort of bias or prejudice. There doesn't have to be a bias or prejudice. I don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt or to clear and convincing evidence that there's a bias or prejudice. But if the evidence suggests that there could be bias or prejudice, that is proper fodder for the jury to consider, and that's what we're asking. In this case, Sergeant Lank's willingness to activate himself as an officer, get involved with Chris Albert, although it was in 2002, and I know that that's something that Mr. Lowley's going to say, and he's going to harp on, this was so long ago, that actually cuts against the Commonwealth case. That shows how long these folks have been involved with each other and how deep their relationships run. for him to sort of deputize himself in that situation in order to help out his longtime friend, whom he socializes with, drinks with, grew up with, establishes a bias and a prejudice, in this case against Miss Reed, and in favor of the Alberts. And it's not like he had a tangential part to play in this, a role to play in this investigation. He was the very first officer to walk in that front door. He absolutely knew what he was going to find when he walked in the front door, which was the homeowners and possibly other witnesses. He engaged in a interview or a series of interviews that were not recorded. I have no idea what was said. The jurors are never going to find out exactly what was said other than to take his word for it. The jurors have to be able to weigh and balance his credibility against an officer that, for instance, even like Sergeant Good, far more unbiased, just sort of a straight shooter. Sergeant Lank is not that person. He never should have walked in that front door. He should have said to his supervisors, I have a relationship with the Albert family. I've known these folks for too long. I grew up with his brother or brothers. I've known them my whole life. I'm probably not the right person to make the decisions about this investigation. And unless and until the jurors know that and can weigh and balance it, they can toss it out if they want to, or they can adopt it if they want to.
So
if they need to be able to hear the evidence.
So I have a question for you. So the part about the complaint at the station
Yes.
and being turned away, who are you going to get that in from other than the Lapalito brothers, which puts us a little far afield? So he didn't adopt it or said, I don't know, or that's what I've heard.
So the Lapalito brothers, I think.
I know, but that's so far removed now.
I disagree. I think they're the ones that are closest to the situation. So we would ask who's better to tell the jurors that they walked in. I can get their police report. I can tell the court when it's dated. It's dated September 2nd or September 3rd. And the Lopalitos walked in on August 31st to make the complaint.
No, I understand because you've outlined it, or
Right.
Ms. Little outlined it, which is very helpful. I don't disagree that some of this is admissible. I just have to figure out how you intend to get it in, because I have to be concerned about if it's a mini trial within a trial, and we're trying to avoid that.
I think
If he were to testify as he did, that's what I understand, and the Commonwealth didn't object to that, that seems admissible to me.
I would probably seek to do it with the court's permission through two pieces of evidence. One would be Mark or Alfredo, and I don't think I would use both of them.
You would not.
I would not. Okay, fair enough. I would seek to ask Mark to join us. He would testify to the altercation. He would testify to the complaint, and then I would seek to either get a stipulation to the date of the police reports. I don't even need the police reports in. If I can't get a stipulation, then I probably would just ask the court to be able to establish that the police report is a business record.
So I would like to see those police reports tonight before I leave, okay?
If I have them.
You'd have to get them.
Right. I will do my best to get them to the court. I can't get them to the court tonight. We don't have them.
Okay.
So I'll start working on that immediately.
All right. Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Lally?
Your Honor, I would submit that defendant has admitted burn. There is no actual relevancy to any of this, and it is essentially a trial within a trial at this point. Bringing in other civilian witnesses to talk about an incident which happened 22 years ago to
So
involving.
let's forget about bringing in the civilian witnesses. How about what we heard as to what Sergeant Lank would testify to?
As to what Sergeant Lank would testify to is a single incident in which he did not witness anything to do with the Albert brothers. Christopher Albert was never at 34 Fairview Road on January 28th or until much, much later in the day of January 29th, and certainly not at the same time that Sergeant Lank was. I think counsel far overestimates what Sergeant Lank's involvement in this particular investigation was. He shows up on scene, he assists with the other officers, Lieutenant Gallagher and Sergeant Good that you've already heard from. And with respect to, he takes a couple of initial statements all those witnesses then subsequently talked to troopers from the state police, testified grand jury, multiple grand juries, and will all be testifying as witnesses in this case. So any purported bias from an incident from 22 years ago involving a brother who wasn't even present at the home on the night in question does nothing but confuse the jury as to what the issues are, and creating this sort of bias out of thin cloth that has no basis whatsoever in the facts of this case.
Okay, so I disagree with you. I don't know yet. I want to see those police reports. I don't know yet what I'm going to allow in, but I disagree that it has nothing to do. If it weren't involving the Alberts, then under the grand jury case, the decision by Justice Gantz, Chief Justice Gantz at the time, it wouldn't come in, but it does. So it comes in for different purposes or different reasons. So I'd like those reports tonight or certainly by tomorrow morning before we come out.
We'll do our best.
Okay. All right. So we'll figure this out tomorrow morning. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All rise, please.
Hey there, thanks for stopping in. We hope you will join us again. We all look forward to next time. We get to talk about true crime. Clues. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests. Where sentences rule and the defense rests. Our true crime family is great. All types of topics we debate. Smash that like and ring that bell. Hit subscribe, you might as well.